Welcome back to the Daily Dope. I'm your host, Brand Strong, and guess what? I'm just a regular, everyday person. I'm not some kind of news person or super expert weed person. I pay attention to what's going on, and hopefully I can keep people informed a little bit. Hard to say sometimes I wonder if I'm not just like doing this as a service to just a few people. Am I wasting my time? Is this a little bit too dangerous than it's worth? And stories like this come along, and man, let me tell you, scary stuff. So this story kind of developed quickly, and it kind of came and went, but it's still some kind of a threat looming. This is like the Jeff Sessions threat, only on a state level, on the statewide level in Michigan. And we started out with, the medical marijuana law that was passed by the people in 2008 being called too vague and not specific enough, didn't have any language in it concerning dispensaries or concentrates or medibles for that matter. So, in order to guide us, I guess, the police in Michigan have steadily been raiding growers, dispensaries, busting patients for the simple crime of basically participating in the cannabis economy for whatever crime that is. Apparently if you're doing it with their license, obviously this is like anything else. If you're doing a business for this or that, you might have to get a license to do business as this or do business for that. So they didn't want to make it so that you could just get a license to run a dispensary. They didn't interpret the original law like that, and then they decided to get together in Lansing and make their own rules as to how they would want this to be done. The manufacturing and distribution of medical marijuana in Michigan, which they have estimated to be around $1 billion industry. So how are they going to get from here to there? And from here, where are we at now? Well, we've heard the Supreme Court say that dispensaries are illegal. We also have ordinances in places all over Michigan where the city or township has agreed to work with people that wanted to run dispensaries, and they've had different, experiences, good and bad, with these people. But for the most part, and I mean the vast majority of these dispensaries that are operating under ordinances of local governments in Michigan are doing good by their community. They're not causing any problems, and they're providing a service that is needed because, quite frankly, there's not enough caregivers in the caregiver patient system, and there is a huge demand that needs to be filled for production and distribution. Because even when it was running like kind of like the wild, wild west, and people were allowed to open dispensaries anywhere because the municipalities didn't really know what to do about it. Even when there was the most amount of dispensaries in Michigan than Michigan's ever had, and I don't know when that was exactly, but it had to be sometime in the last 3 or 4 years. There's been, there was the old ones that, still are around, or people that have taken their place of them, mixed with new ones that came along, and certain places like Lansing and others had made ordinances where a certain amount of dispensaries were allowed. That might have changed the number dramatically, like in Detroit, where they've lost hundreds of dispensaries. But overall, even during the time when there was the most dispensaries that there ever was in Michigan, there was still a lot of people being left out in the cold. And so that's where are we at now? We are in a situation where there's still a lot of dispensaries operating, and apparently illegally, but sometimes they have paid their local governments ordinance fees for operating, and maybe even taxes, I think I've heard, but I'm not positive about that. Nonetheless, what it comes down to is there's still a lot of dispensaries out there. I mean, there's a ton of them. And there's still a lot of areas that don't have any dispensaries, and they would like to have dispensaries. Recently, after the most recent situation that has happened since Michigan has licensed, or not licensed, but wrote a new public act that basically allows dispensaries and other marijuana facilities, and they have a timetable for the rollout of that. And in the timetable, there's deadlines. And one of the deadlines was that they had to put together this medical marijuana board, and that's right here. This is 3 of the 5 members of the Medical Marijuana Licensing Board. You have Vivian Picard right here, and you have Donald Bailey right here. Now this guy here is a former state police sergeant, and then over here we have David LaMontagne. And yeah, so they had 2 meetings. And we're going to read through these articles about what happened here at these meetings. And it's kind of alarming. And then we're going to look at a couple videos. So we'll just go right into this article here in Michigan News by Emily Lawler. Medical marijuana dispensaries would need to cease operation by a date certain if they wanted to be eligible for licensure in the future, the chair of the Medical Marijuana Licensing Board signaled at a Monday meeting. Okay, he said, then another person on the board, Rick Johnson, he's the actual chair of the board. He says, if we don't do this today, we're going to do it somewhere in the future because it needs to be done, said Rick Johnson, who chairs the board. And I just have a quick idea here. Why does it need to be done? When the time comes, everybody can go grab their application for a license, and then it can be settled then, you know. I mean, it's obvious that this is a state control board, and they want complete control. But what the law did was it gave municipalities the power to set up these licenses, and they're the ones that you have to fill out the application for if they're allowing facilities. So currently, a lot of places have dispensaries already going. So I'm not quite sure what he's talking about here. But anyway, it was just kind of confusing when I first heard this story. I'm like, what are you talking about, man? The state doesn't decide on local, you know, that's like micromanaging. And the board is like a state board that recommend things for the medical marijuana program. Like, I'm not even sure. I'd have to reread the specifics, but the law that they passed last year for the facilities do include a lot of pages about this 5-member board. So the board ultimately postponed the motion, which came from board member Donald Bailey. And like I said, he was the former state police sergeant right there. He proposed that if dispensaries did not close by September 15th, they would not be eligible for licensure under the new dispensary licensing system that would be put in place on December 15th. Now, I don't know if that's just him talking or if that's some kind of a rule that's in there. Once again, I should read and find that out. But I don't think that's a thing because it wasn't. This isn't something that was written into that law. So this is just something he's just kind of threw out there. He's like, well, hey, maybe we should punish people if they don't want to close down. And how we punish them is we don't give them a license. I mean, how fair is that? You're talking about people that have been running these things, and this is the 10th year that this program has been around. Some of these dispensaries have been here almost the whole time. And they're good actors. They didn't do anything wrong, except for what you're saying is wrong by being open when they're not supposed to be. But that's arbitrary too, because basically you're going on a concept that as a higher power you can come and crush somebody just because you don't want them to be opened. He pointed to a 2013 Michigan Supreme Court decision that pegged dispensaries as operating illegally. Okay, but you're going against the Michigan Supreme Court's decision in December, starting with your timetable of your new rollout of the Facilities Act. So as soon as you wrote the Facilities Act and you made a timetable, the problem with that is if you ran that by the Supreme Court, they would be like, your timetable is irrelevant. As soon as you wrote a law saying that dispensaries were going to be allowed, then you have to go by that. And the fact that people have to go through this licensing process and the municipality has to set the rules and all that stuff, that's a whole different issue. In that situation, it seems like the township where dispensaries already exist would almost have to adopt the laws just so they can make their own rules. And if they already have rules and ordinances to cover it, then this is just like Jeff Sessions coming down on states that have legalized marijuana. Like, oh, hey, I know you guys are running a pretty good, tight-knit ship over there, and you have rules, and you have police just in case someone's not following the rules. But anyway, we're still going to come in and shut down the dispensaries. That doesn't seem like it's legal or constitutionally sound anyway. And, of course, he says every dispensary that's out there now is open in violation. Everyone that's open is in violation of the Medical Marijuana Act, the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act. Now, that's saying that just because it wasn't written word for word in the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act that dispensaries were allowed, then they're automatically not allowed, and it's automatically illegal to operate them. And that's one of the things I've always had a problem with, this overt interpretation being on the side of erring, on the side that you go to jail if it ain't written in there and they can catch you doing it. It doesn't make any sense. So same with they didn't have anything in there about concentrates. So they said, well, then if you have some concentrates, then you're holding an illegal substance. Who's to say that? When you say that everything, federal definition of marijuana, every part of the plant is marijuana and it's all illegal and it's all a felony, then what's the difference whether it's concentrated or not? Doesn't make any sense. It's still just marijuana. It's not like there's something extra in there that's also illegal. So the action was strongly opposed by medical marijuana patients, of course, because they're the ones that ultimately will suffer. You're talking about a system where we're not even at the application phase yet. You have the application phase in December, so people are going to get approved or whatever. It's going to take until spring, maybe, if we're lucky, for people to get license approved, facilities looked at and okayed. And that's just to say that we know the municipalities in question are going to have everything thought of, they're going to be able to test your facilities out and make sure everything's according to, their ordinances. So, I don't know. The patients will suffer because then you're talking about growing a crop of marijuana or whatever. Even starting the first crop of a continuous crop system. indoor crops, of course. You know, when we're talking about these facilities, we're talking about like big, you know, somewhat big facilities that grow 1,000 plants or more. All this takes time. You're talking about at least 6 months to get a crop out after all this other stuff, and then you got to process it for like another month. And will they have all the dispensaries that are supposed to be set up? And I'm thinking that that's sometime December 2018 when you're going to start seeing those opening up. And you know, there's no stopgap. It's just complete. What he's proposing is a complete jump into a ravine for, it sounds like, about a year before you'll have good access to medical marijuana for the patients, who at that point in time, if you go take out all these dispensaries, and also I'm hearing that there's also this campaign of fear on actual caregivers that grow cannabis, because apparently the general thinking here is that these dispensaries only exist because caregivers are selling them their overage, which has also been deemed illegal by the same Supreme Court. So you're going to start seeing, you know, this whole medical marijuana system just fold right up and turn into a black market overnight, because you're talking about the cops going after the dispensaries. The cops are going to go after the growers who are the caregivers for patients right now. And if that happens because of the greedy few people that want to take over this quote unquote medical marijuana industry that they've estimated to be about $1 billion, then you're sitting here in a situation where the people that have medical marijuana cards are no longer going to even want to have them. They're going to feel like anybody that opens up a dispensary after that is going to be just part of this organized government takeover that put everybody that was honest actors that, you know, fought for this thing and stuck their necks out to do this thing, you know. And you know, you're talking about the dispensaries that have provided safe access to patients for years, just getting busted like they're, you know, black market operators from, you know, drug cartels or something. I mean, I don't understand why you want to treat people like this. You're like, okay, you guys are doing something that we want to do, and it's before we're going to start doing it on paper. Now, I get that you want people to have licenses, and you have this process that's written into law, so people have to follow the law. But what other business world is there where you have this threat by some little 5-person board that yields a lot of power? Because this guy's a former state police sergeant, so he has a lot of people in the state police department that knows him, and I'm kind of afraid to even talk about these people in this video. It's a very powerful little organization, and if he says something, he starts talking about how, you know, he don't like these dispensaries that are floating around out there operating in the gray, because, you know, he wants that shit shut down. His friends are right there. You know, they are the people that shut it down. Every county has state police officers operating in it. There's like a couple of different posts in Genesee County, and they're, you know, organizing raids all the time. Sue Malf, a patient from Traverse City, said she didn't appreciate the board talking about shutting down dispensaries. She said depending on the concentrates she was only able to get at the medical marijuana shops. Quote, what am I supposed to do during that time? Am I supposed to go back on the black market to get what I need, she asked. And the black market's really scary out there right now. You don't know what you're going to get, especially when you're talking about wax and concentrates. Until Monday's meeting, any changes to dispensaries were expected to happen in December, when a state law passed last year required a new licensing system to be implemented. And it was highly expected that people were going to be able to get in on the new dispensary licenses that were operating dispensaries before. I don't see any problem with that crossover, except for some of the application fee being like set at maximum $5,000 seems to make people think that they can just say $5,000. Oh, I'm going to make sure it's the max. I mean, this is small towns we're talking about doing that. Come on. Dispensaries, and then also the actual license itself can cost up to, like, in Lansing, they're talking about $100,000 a year. So, I don't know, man. This is basically, part of the takeover, I guess, is when these people got selected for this board. It was the people, these other people are connected, man. We'll get into a little bit more on who picked who or whatever. Mark Gibson, a PhD candidate at Michigan State University, is also a medical marijuana patient and with degenerative bone disease. He asked the board to consider patient access. Quote, I ask in fairness, not talking about the businesses, but the patients, and ensuring that they have continuous access. Joseph Smith, a caregiver, said he read the law and it mentioned patients and caregivers, not dispensaries. Now, this is just somebody that's a naysayer, but he says, I would have loved to have had a sign and raked in some money, but the law wouldn't allow me to do it, so I didn't do it, he said. Now, that's what I mean when I said earlier, people that stuck their necks out, because they were operating in questionable legal territory, and for them to do so and be providing safe access of medical marijuana to patients that didn't have that kind of access was a great service. So I don't know who this guy's hating on. But he did advocate keeping dispensaries open for the patients. He recommended a new licensing process that had a point system benefiting people like him who had followed the rules. No, what he really wants is just to be grandfathered in for no reason at all. I mean, what's the whole point here? What's this point system going to say? Oh, you get 50 points right off the bat. I mean, points, nothing. The only thing that gets you into a dispensary is money and connections, it seems like. And we're going to listen to Tim Beck. It's kind of hard to hear, but basically he helped pass the initial voter-initiated medical marijuana legislation. He accused the board of defecating on dispensaries. He said when he heard the rumors the board wanted to shut down all the dispensaries, he initially dismissed them. Quote, this is an unprecedented action, Beck said. The board ended up postponing the action after it became clear that, with one member absent, Bailey didn't have the votes to pass his proposal on Monday. Jason Moon, a spokesperson for the Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs, which houses the Bureau of Medical Marijuana Regulation, said there would be a review if such proposal did pass. The Bureau of Medical Marijuana Regulatory Regulation will thoroughly review the recommendations and discussion from the board and consult with the Attorney General's office before any action is taken, Moon said. And while you're at it, why don't you go talk to the treasurer? And yeah, that's going to cost a lot of money to kick in that many doors. And these raids are not pretty, man. They're not going to be pretty, and the look is going to be really ugly. And for this kind of an authoritarian action to come down is really seriously like, it's kind of unprecedented, to be honest. It would be the biggest headline. I've done a lot of weed news in the last year, but this would be the biggest headline. Like, we heard the whisperings of other states that passed more robust regulations after they had medical marijuana laws for a few years, just like Michigan. We're going through the same thing. Oregon and Colorado and California all went through this shit. They want to take you out, man. They want to take out the old players, and they want to replace them with the old prohibitionists. That's what's going on here. It's no fucking different. It's the same thing. The board asked for input from Laura before they made a decision on requiring dispensaries to shut down. Board member Vivian Picard said she didn't feel she had the information she needed to make a decision at Monday's meeting. I hope she don't change her mind all of a sudden, because usually when I hear that from a politician, the first thing that comes to mind is, I need to go talk to these people that want to do this drastic action shit and make sure they're paying me my payoff. The discussion took place at the board's second meeting. At the first, hundreds of people packed the room. The board's next posted meeting is on October 12th, though Johnson said the board would meet again before September 15th to consider Bailey's proposal to shut down the dispensaries. And that's crunch time because, September 15th only leaves you with a couple months before the actual applications are supposed to go out. But we're still, forget about that, because it ain't like as soon as someone turns in an application at the end of the month in December, like they're going to get it and fill it out and just churn it right back in. And here's my fee money, 10 grand or whatever the hell it is. It ain't like there's going to be a dispensary opening up the next day anywhere, let alone all the places right now that people already feel like they don't have enough access, and access just is overall not really there, guys. In a lot of locations. So we'll talk about that a little bit too later, because what happened was a lot of places had ordinances where you couldn't have dispensaries here, there, or the other place, depending on how close it was to a church or a daycare center or whatever. In some cases, liquor stores. So what you have is basically, again, a patchwork of regulations from city to city, and there was dispensaries were only allowed in certain areas in certain cities, and therefore that's why there's like 30 dispensaries on one block, because that's where, after looking at the map and saying, well, they don't want them anywhere but here, and that's where they end up. So, and I still don't see that as being a problem. So regulations and licensing scheme for a medical marijuana dispensary must be in place by December 15th. And that's talking about your town. Your town has to have their ordinance together and figured out, and a license application drawn up, fees set. All this has to be done by December 15th. So unless you've heard murmurs of your township doing something along the way of setting these regulations up, you might want to go talk to somebody, because they probably aren't doing this shit. And maybe they've had town halls. I've heard a million of them. People at these town halls are really like, they're giving you the reefer madness. And, all right, I said I was going to play you the part where Tim Beck says that they're defecating on the dispensaries. Let's see.
Communities, local municipalities, prosecutors, county sheriffs that decided we don't have a problem. And these dispensaries that were operating under their interpretation of the law, not yours, Mr. Bailey, that they were good citizens. They were doing all right. They are not a threat to the community. They're providing a valid, viable, serious need. And this comes across to me and most of us as petty, vindictive, and authoritarian in the worst sense of the word. But I guess you need a scapegoat so one can just defecate on dispensaries. Thank you.
And there you have it. Defecating on dispensaries. And then here's the write-up by Rick Thompson about about today's meeting, or the second meeting. Within 10 minutes of the start of the second meeting of the Medical Marijuana Facilities Licensing Board, former Michigan State Police Sergeant Don Bailey made a motion to close all medical marijuana dispensaries and associated businesses within 2 weeks. It didn't get better from there. The meeting was held in the Kellogg Center in East Lansing. 200 plus attended. The meeting was live streamed through the internet, so there were an untold number of people who heard Don Bailey argue that shuttering all the dispensaries, testing labs, cultivation centers, and processors already existing in the state was the fair thing to do. Now, I don't know about you, but as far as I know, testing labs, other than the small samples of cannabis that they have, that they're testing, that aren't really going to be used for consumption are really not a problem. I mean, they probably are ready to get their licenses and just cross right over too. I didn't know that they were in your crosshairs. And then you have these cultivation centers, which I don't even know what that is, because they're currently not only not allowed by the current law, but it would be completely illegal. I mean, you can't get a license to do that. Processors. So you're gonna go after processors. There's no like organized people that do that. There's not. I don't understand that part either. Normally speaking, the people that grow cannabis, the caregivers, are also the processors. They do all the other. It's all like under one roof kind of thing. And he said that shutting them down was the fair thing to do. How do you get there? For those that are getting into the business or anticipating getting into the business, it's a matter of fundamental fairness that everybody starts the race on the start line and nobody has a 40-yard advance, Bailey said, and was quoted by Michigan Radio. I don't get that logic. But no other business, once again, no other business in the universe that has evolved into what they are today had to have something like this where, you know, right before licenses came out for the business, you know, they had to shut down everybody that was already doing it. And it doesn't seem like it makes sense, because who are you going to get to do all this stuff? You know, people that have no experience at all doing it. Bailey's references to the businesses which will start the application process on December 15th, 2017. He would like to see the state scrubbed clean of cannabis businesses so that the new licensees can open up without any competition. His interest is in being fair to the new businesses, not the old citizens who compose the program. And like I was saying, it's like a Jeff Sessions cracking down, because a lot of these places, they're not just open, you know, operating in a vacuum. They're existing in a place where there's a police headquarters, you know, there's police that drive by their facilities all the time. There's people that run city halls and stuff know they're there. And like I said, a lot of the times these people have ordinances that they're following, and fees and fines or fees and license fees or whatever that they've already paid. All right, so patient after patient paraded in front of the board, telling how they need this. They need the services provided by a dispensary to satisfy their medical need. How their caregiver lacks the skill or materials to produce specialty medicines. The ill and injured detail how their quality of life would be impacted by the closure of their dispensary if there were no others to replace it. This went on for hours. When the public comment was complete, Bailey looked at the chairman of the board, former Speaker of the House and current Republican darling Rick Johnson, and reminded him that they are still going to vote on shutting down all the dispensaries in the state. I agree with Don. They all have to go, Johnson said. Both Bailey and Johnson expressed business-centric reasons for shutting medical marijuana facilities. If we don't do this today, we're going to do this somewhere in the future because it needs to be done, Johnson said, as reported by Michigan Radio. Bailey added, I don't think we should in any respect reward people for not following the law as it currently is. The whole problem with that is that you just snuck the law right in under their noses, knowing that they were operating, and basically cutting them out of the business potential by doing what you're doing now, instead of just giving them a pathway to the license that they should be granted because they actually are doing successful at doing this. Now, I'm sure you can find some bad actors out there that are doing something a little bit shady, but do they deserve to go to jail and have their business shut down because they weren't following the laws as it currently is? And they can't. It's impossible for them to follow the law as it currently is because they don't have an application until December 15th. You can't get an application till then. that is exactly what we would be doing by letting dispensaries remain open," he said during the final board comments. This is weird because, again, nobody's ever done this any time in history where they're just going to go after the people that have already been doing something. The bottom line is it is fundamentally unfair to those who are not opening. They are doing it the right way, but by not opening, and they should not be penalized. Well, my argument to that is that they go ahead and start now if you want. No one has a problem with that, except for maybe you, but it sounds like you're trying to protect certain people that are basically in position to just pounce on these licenses. So I think it's fundamentally fair to let the people that already are operating to stay open and get licenses when the licensing comes down in their town. And if their town didn't want them there in the first place, then they could have gotten rid of them already. Like I said, their town has police officers and they have prosecutors and all that other stuff in jails. No vote was taken during the board proceedings because, as Johnson put it, you don't have the votes. Don, one of the 4 members of the board, seemed to refuse the notion that shuttering all dispensaries was wise. And like the other lady, David Lamontagne also said, "I need more information." Hopefully he needs more information and not more payoff. At the onset of the meeting, Johnson named the next meeting date as October 12th. By the end of the session, the board determined they need to meet in September, although the meeting's purpose seems to be for the board to order the closure of all dispensaries and associated businesses in the state. To try to bump it up to September. It's a power they really don't have, according to comments made by Director of the Bureau of Medical Marijuana Regulation, Andrew Brisboe. Brisboe delivered his first report to the board after Bailey's failed attempt at forcing passage of his scorched earth policy. His subject was an update on the progress of the seed-to-sale tracking program and the use of the METRC computer system to track cannabis cultivation, transport, and purchasing. Before he addressed this subject, Brisboe interjected a polite reminder to the board that they do not have the power to make policy for Laura or for the Bureau. The board makes recommendations, Brisboe said, and that all decisions required approval by the BMMR and Laura. That did not deter Bailey, who later said he didn't care what anyone else thought. If dispensaries were open after a certain date, he would vote no on approving any applications made by those business owners for any business under the new MMFLA program. And I think he can do that. Although, when you're talking about these business applications coming in, they come into the local municipality, and I think they get approved there. I don't know why they would go to him. But and like I said, maybe I need to brush up on my Public Acts 282 and whatnot. Maybe 281 has this in it, but there's a lot of writing about this board and what their powers are and all that. But I don't know. It seems like, again, it seems kind of micromanagey for a 5-person state-level board, to be looking at, say, an application from, Bob Frenchie over there in Irish Township, Michigan, with population 500. Doesn't his application go to the local, to Irish Township or whatever, wherever he lived? Wouldn't it go to them and they look at it and then they go to look at his facilities? Because that's what it really comes down to, is part of them approving an application. It isn't something where people are just like, bribing the public official to get their application. It's like the public officials have to actually interview the person. They got to do a background check. Then they got to go look at the facilities, make sure everything's on the up and ups. Even look at who they want to hire and do background checks on them. all this stuff to make an application go through. And then what? Does it go up there for this 5-person board has to look at them too? It just seems like micromanaging that this boy might not have time for that. I don't know. So he tried to pass a motion to command Laura to census each and every community in the state. Find out which ones have businesses which serve patients, require them to determine the ownership of that business, submit that data to Laura, have the department make a master list and give it to the board so they would know who the bad actors are. I don't think Laura has the authority to do that according to the medical marijuana law that's current, in its current state. So what he's trying to say is the licensing and regulations, he wants them to go to every community in Michigan, find out which ones have businesses that serve patients, require them to determine the owners, who are the owners of that business. Now again, this is some serious micromanaging even for Laura, who handles thousands and thousands of applications for different licenses. You know, that they don't do just marijuana licensing, they do all the licensing and regulations. So then you're going to submit all that data to Laura, and then they're going to make a master list and give it to the 5-person board, just so they know who's all the dispensaries are. That really sounds like it's a witch hunt about to happen. And if it did, that would be huge resources to do what that paragraph said. He even tried to make them post the list of businesses and suspected owners on the internet for all to see. And this is weird because he's acting like all these people are bad actors. He said it right here. No, maybe that's Rick Thompson's words, but whatever. He's calling these people bad actors. And you know, he wants them gone. He wants them to go away. Shut down, or we're going to put you in prison with charges. And he wants to put a list out there. It's almost as if to shame people. I mean, people in the local community know who their dispensaries are. I mean, right here, there's dispensaries listed right on the side of articles you can find all day, you know. So, all right, assuming Director Briskbow is correct, the board cannot require or instruct anyone to do anything. The power and authority possessed by these two men is still very real. They were able to post 6 uniformed officers in the Kellogg Center for the entire meeting. Bailey has connections within the Michigan State Police, and he was nominated for the board position by Speaker of the House, Tom Leonard. Johnson has powerful connections within the Republican Party and in the Michigan legislature. He was nominated for the board position by the Senate Majority Leader, Senator Meekoff. Even if their bold demands for a clean sweeping of the state are largely impotent, a scorched earth policy of eradication has been the fear of the Michigan patient community. Many in the audience at Monday's meeting expressed a fear that the board members would inspire police agencies or local communities to change their policies and initiate action against the patient services industry without provocation or evidence of wrongdoing. All right. And there's one more little bit on this before I play another video about it. And this is the Click on Detroit article that came out. It came out Monday, and then they updated it Tuesday after the second meeting. So this basically frames it as that they kind of punted it down the road. Tables the proposal, they call it. Proposal to shut down every dispensary in Michigan was sent the medical marijuana community into a panic Monday night. When I heard the news, I was already exhausted, and I'm just like, you know what? I'll just handle this one after it plays out. And it's still playing out, and it's basically we're waiting on this next meeting in September, I guess. So the new state board responsible for overseeing medical marijuana brought up a resolution that would close all medical marijuana dispensaries by September 5th. I'm not sure if there was, I guess that was in the actual proposal language. So anyway, after the discussion, that's pretty fast too. Like, think about that. What if that kind of a switch can be pulled? Like, well, hey, I guess you would have like Bill Schuette out there telling people like, yeah, go to wherever dispensaries are open in your town and just start arresting people if they're not going to relinquish their business or put a padlock on it or whatever. By September 5th, wow, that's like 2 weeks. After discussion, the group tabled the resolution in order to get an opinion from other state agencies. The new board is responsible for creating new regulations to rein in the state's proliferation of pot shops. This is not to rein in proliferation of pot shops. See, this is why you don't get your news about marijuana from like these types of sources. Because first of all, pot shops, these are not pot shops. There's no such thing as a pot shop. But if you're going to call something a pot shop, dispensaries are probably not it. The licensing board is there to license new commercial facilities, Attorney Jeff Schroeder said. They're not there as a law enforcement agency. Schroeder said it would take a massive law enforcement operation to shut down all the dispensaries, and he doesn't see it happening. I don't either, but I'm sure wherever it can happen and wherever there's corrupt players ready to take over, it will happen. Michigan voters approved medical... It already has happened, I'm sorry. Did I not mention that it's been happening in Michigan for, I don't know, the last year? Before the players even got into place to take over the medical marijuana industry, as they call it, they were already doing this. They were already finding out who was actually helping patients and shutting them down. Michigan voters approved medical marijuana in 2008, but the law did not plan for all the dispensaries that have popped up all over the state. And that's another just total terrible assassination of character with that statement, because these dispensaries haven't been, there's not enough of them. And they're not popping up all over the state, as you say. Really hardworking individuals, in most cases. Are there some bad actors in the dispensary world? Oh, I'm sure there are. Just like there's bad actors in the liquor store world or the daycare world. There's bad actors in the Catholic Church. All right? There's bad actors everywhere. Don't matter what industry you're talking about or how good it's supposed to be. Oh, it's supposed to be medicine, so there shouldn't be anybody out there just trying to make a buck. You know what? You're full of shit for assuming that, because that's what these guys are trying to do. And they're trying to not just make a buck. They're trying to crush anybody else that wants to make any money. So just keep that in mind at all times. 8 Mile Road is a sea of green neon signs. In some cases, multiple dispensaries can be found in a 2-block area. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier, because Detroit is the worst ordinance in the state as far as where you can have a dispensary. Besides the ones that are like nowhere at all. Detroit has like these 1,000 feet radial bands around everything, including drugstores, liquor stores, daycare centers, things that really doesn't matter. Churches, who cares if you set up a dispensary right next door to a church? They're only there one day a week anyway, the day that nobody else is around. And who cares anyway? You know, what's the big deal? So then you got people who are like, it's absolutely crazy, said resident Rhonda Kendall McGregor. They should not be concentrated like that. Well, then don't ban them from every other neighborhood and they won't be all in one neighborhood. That's the simplest solution. It's like, you can't get any easier than that. And that's why supply and demand and the government shouldn't regulate. Yeah, you know, I believe a lot of that thing about the government should be a little bit more hands-off, because what they're trying to do is control commerce. And that's the big dream, I guess, of the government, is to somehow control cannabis. Like, you couldn't control it when it was completely outlawed, and now that it's, not completely outlawed, you want to try to control where it can be done, this and do that, and who gets to be the operators, and that's not how it works. You can't make something happen, conceptualize it and then make it happen. Something that's already been happening for thousands of years. Kendall McGregor is not in favor of shutting everything down, but she's in favor of better regulations preventing a glut of dispensaries. Whatever. So that's all we got there. And then we have an interview with a couple of different people, one being Chad Morrow. And he talks about the situation in Gaylord.
If they remove all the dispensaries, where are these patients going to travel to?
A proposal by a member of the state's medical marijuana licensing board has local dispensary owners worried about their ability to get a license. Board member and retired Michigan State Police Sergeant Don Bailey says dispensaries should close their doors until the state makes license applications available.
Bailey's proposal could not force dispensaries to close, but if they don't, it would prevent them from getting a license this winter. 9 and 10's Aaron Parsegian spoke with Gaylord dispensary owners and has more details about this proposal.
There needs to be access for patients, and that was what it was all. It was about compassion.
Local dispensary owners say if the proposal is approved, it would prevent northern Michigan patients from getting access to regulated, or what they call safe, medical marijuana.
Which is what this particular law was to get people away from. We were supposed to make safe access for patients, not put them into back alleys. It was about compassion. It was about giving these patients access. And throughout multiple court opinions, Supreme Court opinions, there's been several of them, it's been whittled and just destroyed.
At the meeting, board member Bailey cited a Supreme Court case and said that every dispensary in the state is in violation of the Medical Marijuana Act. His proposal would close all dispensaries until mid-December. However, Morrow says the effects would last much longer.
In December, you can start applying, but nobody's even going to get approved and get licensed and get all this stuff up and running until sometime in the spring of next year. So we're talking 4 to 6 months of no medicine.
Following the raids in Gaylord last...
That 4 to 6 months, man, is just, that's giving them a lot of credit. Like, they're going to actually get this thing going that fast. Whoops. No, nobody really has good video.
Open, even if the
proposal and get all this stuff up and running until sometime in the spring of next year. So we're talking 4 to 6 months of no medicine.
Talking a year.
Following the raids in Gaylord last month, one dispensary stayed open. They plan to remain open even if the proposal is passed.
It would affect our business in a negative way. We'll survive without it because we're a natural health store. So we're kind of up in arms at what to do. We're not getting honest answers. We're not given anybody to speak to. Everything is ambiguous. So we're kind of left in the dark.
The Medical Marijuana Licensing Board will make their decision on the proposal at a special meeting next month. In Gaylord, Aaron Parsegian, 9 and 10 News.
I guess, I don't know. I don't really have much else to say about this except for this is another big signal that there's some big players that are ready to take this thing over in a big way. And they're not afraid. They're so bold that they're not afraid to make big moves like shutting down hundreds of dispensaries statewide in 2 weeks' time was their timetable that they were looking at. Let me just say this one more time so that everybody is clear about how the patients would react. I've already heard patients say this too, besides the the obvious activist type people, is that these dispensaries, these state-run dispensaries that are iffy on whether or not they were some of these highly connected corrupt players that got these dispensary licenses. We won't know that until, you know, sometime after they start opening up. Like Chad said, in the spring, they might start opening up. We might see business plans or announcements of them. You want to talk about something that's going to be obviously boycotted. Not only are they going to get boycotted, but Laura knows, the licensing and regulatory affairs people know that this would be a disaster to the program. People would stop getting medical marijuana cards and stop going to dispensaries altogether. I mean, sure, you're still going to have a lot of people that will, because either they'll have to or they're just new people that don't care about everything that happened before. But a move like that is a bold move. And you don't do stuff like that if you don't, you know, think it's guaranteed that what you're trying to do is, in the long run, is going to work. So there you have it. Yeah, the headline you seen on that MMMP was pretty accurate sounding. There's this former state police sergeant right here, and it looks like this board is set to aggressively try to take over the medical marijuana industry, quote unquote, in Michigan. I mean, this is kind of like a follow-up video to the one I made 4 months ago about how, you know, medical marijuana is basically looked at as an industry by the government in Michigan, which is the most corrupt government in America, by many metrics. And yeah, it looks like they have people in line that are highly connected, as in connected to the people that are writing the rules, people that are giving the licenses out, approving the licenses. And you heard this guy say, he said, okay, if you don't want to shut down before the licenses are passed out in December, then you won't get approved. So you'll get blacklisted. So it's either play ball or never play ball. Yeah, I don't know who they got stepping in to take over all of this, but I don't think it's enough people, and it's not fast enough either. So that's my final 2 points, is there's no way you're going to get enough people to run all the stuff you're talking about. Unless it's going to be set up like overnight, you know, CVS or something. Like all of a sudden they have their people connected, has dispensaries in almost every town, just like every other town. Because if you live in a town like where I live, they didn't approve the Facilities Act. And they had people that were parroting the same kind of reefer madness all over the state about, oh, you have too many bad people come to town when marijuana is legalized, and they make up all this reefer madness stuff about too much access and kids will have access to it, and the marijuana of today, you know, it's so strong. And whatever, and then you hear about the town next door, though, they got facilities coming in, and it's not hard to figure out, man, that these people are going to be in place, and then from top to bottom, man, it's like they all act like they're going to retire in this big sea of green. So that's where we're at, man. This is another thing that a lot of people have issue with, is the fact that this guy, this former state police sergeant, who's still highly connected with state police current, and now he's on this board, this medical marijuana licensing board, that makes crucial decisions about what's going on in the medical marijuana, quote-unquote, industry in Michigan. I'm going to say that this board is off to a real rocky start, and that medical marijuana in Michigan, if this is how things are going to be going from here on out, it's going to be really ugly. It's not going to be the kind of thing that anybody wants to be a part of. And I'm saying patients are going to walk away from this. Patients were already skeptical about dispensaries when it was run by the same people that might have sold them weed back when it was illegal, you know. And in a lot of instances, these dispensaries are run by people that were in the industry before, you know, in the black market before it was legal. And maybe that's what this is this is the same old prohibitionists that used to arrest people back then for doing what we're doing now. They see that the same people are in it, are doing, you know, this legitimately, and they made it illegitimate by basically throwing an application out there and some regulations that weren't there before, and then acting like, oh, you aren't complying with this. Well, you were never complying with the law because it didn't spell out dispensaries in the first place. So there's a lot to this. I'm kind of talking myself back to the beginning, and it's just because it's a lot to take in. I'm still kind of absorbing it myself. And I'm sure I'll have another update about this very soon. But file this one under those highly connected, highly moneyed interests. It's taking over the medical marijuana industry in Michigan.